Welcome to the Legendarium. We are the Blue Team, and we are excited to be in studio.
That's because it's been like 17 years since we've been together.
Well, COVID makes it feel like 17 years. We are here. We are I said we're the Blue Team. Kenn, Megan, myself, we're all here.
Who are you?
May I request that during this episode, we all call each other by our full names, like they do in the book, because it's Deja Taurus, Tars Tarkus, John Carter.
Well, let's be fair. It's Tars Tarkus, son of blah, 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 blah. We don't know his full name.
Sure. It's true. But I
And
still
Deja
thought that
Thoris,
was a kind of annoying detail.
Daughter of 1,000 Jedix. And
Yeah. I mean, I guess we're getting it from John Carter's point of view. But why is he calling everybody by their full name? I don't know. Anyway.
I guess we're going to find out.
Maybe
we'll come up with some reasons, right?
Because he's a Southern gentleman. That's why.
Well, that's for sure. Something's running through his blood. If you are new to the Legendarium and you've not, and people, obviously there are probably people who are, we welcome you. We're glad you're here, but we're gonna kind of jump in. Oh, wait, housekeeping. You guys are supposed to remind me to do housekeeping. Patreon, Discord, join us on our social media stuff.
You were rolling. I mean,
You have one job.
I was rickrolling is what I was doing. We would love to have our fans. That sounds weird, but they kind of are. Love to have our community join with us on Discord and through the Twitter and through all of those other accesses. So come and join us, have some fun.
you know how old you sound saying the Twitter?
I know, but I kind of like it because I had a birthday and I got a little more gray in my hair, and it's just kind of the way things go.
Well, we're on YouTube now also.
I know, and that makes me a little uncomfortable sometimes.
Hey, Craig has been working really hard on those videos.
I
We
know,
should send people
I
there
know.
to watch them.
And the Todd stash is undefeated.
Yeah.
Well,
True that.
My wife is not really convinced of that,
should never
but
say that.
hopefully it will. Probably doesn't rank as a weapon that John Carter would be able to use on Mars, but maybe pretty close.
Oh, he'd find a way.
he
He's got
certainly
skills.
would find a way.
He'd
That's
find
a
a way.
segue. If I ever
All
heard
right.
one.
Well, we are discussing A Princess of Mars. We've all read it.
Yes.
Yep.
Kenn has a recap.
Yes.
But before we do the recap, I just have to ask one question. Did you like the book?
Well, let me answer your question with a question.
All right, go ahead.
Have you ever found yourself running from Indians only to stumble into a dark cavern and let a peyote-induced hallucination transport you butt-a naked to Mars, where you use your increased bone density and musculature and your general southern chivalry and charm to become a superhero conqueror with a cool alien dog and a smoking hot Martian babe?
One time. That did happen once.
All right. And if you answered yes, Megan, then you just may be John Carter, possibly immortal gentleman veteran of the Virginia Confederate Army, the first Superman of literature, and uncle of Edgar Rice Burroughs, probably, who's also the author of A Princess of Mars, the first of his 11 books in the Barsoom series. Yeah, we'll see how many of those we get to.
11 books.
Megan's ready for all of them, I think. It's the start of an incredible journey for the smooth-talking Carter, who finds himself captured by a savage band of four-armed lizard men. He uses his smarts and his Earth-accustomed muscles to break himself and Deja Thoris, the hot, human-looking daughter of a Martian king, out of captivity before they can become slaves of that evil Thark leader, Tal Hajus.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
Long story short, Carter fights bad guys and giant apes, impresses everybody with his ability to jump. I really wanted to add a joke in there about his impressive sack, but I refrained. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And he returns Deja Thoris to her people, getting himself involved in Martian politics in the process. It all gets done using every sci-fi fantasy trope available. Of course, they weren't really tropes at that time because the notorious ERB literally helped create the genre. So, no questions, no predictions. The story's just 100 years old. Let's discuss. That's it. That's the recap.
I think that would have helped me enjoy it more if I had actually, because my approach is usually just to jump into things with no context because I don't like spoilers. But I think it would have really helped me this time to
Knowing that it was over 100 years old.
when the book was written, to actually look up the date. I'm like, oh, 1913, 1912. That's okay. Trying to put it in context. Who would be reading this? Oh, they would like that the romance is two-dimensional. They would like, So it would have helped me to enjoy it more, of having all of that in mind. Because as it was, I was looking at it as a cynical woman from 2021.
I was going to say, they would like the absolute objectification of females as something to be won, not a character to actually drive the plot forward.
Yeah, I think it would have bugged them less. Especially, because I'm used to Brandon Sanderson's women who definitely like they're within their gender norms, culture norms, but they have a certain amount of power and they each have their own personality.
Yeah.
And none of these women really got to.
Nope, they don't. But we'll talk about why. Well, one did, but she has 4 arms and giant tusks coming out of her face.
Well, and she was kind of a doormat.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of a
Yeah,
doormat.
kind of.
Well, everybody was compared
One
to
of the
John
reasons
Carter.
I don't like John Carter, I literally have a heading, things I hate about John Carter.
Wow.
So there you go.
Look at that type.
We can
Holy
talk about
cow.
that later.
So, no, wait a minute. Ken, it sounds like you enjoyed the book.
Well, I enjoyed the book. I'm not going to say it's, high fantasy, earth shattering. My life is now changed for reading it, literature, but I enjoyed it just fine. It was like, hey,
Todd
this is an
promised
interesting
us
story.
something fun. He's like, it's not
was
deep,
fun.
but it's fun. It's
It
a
was
fun
fun to me.
escape. And I'm like, yes, actually, that was true.
There is probably one level 3 moment in this whole book. Maybe. Only barely.
Do you want to talk about it now or you want to save it?
And 0 tears. There were 0 tears for me when I was reading this book. Just want to, I know.
Craig's over
Now
there
there might be
shocked.
There might be some tears while we're talking about it, but they might be tears of joy and laughter. There might
Yeah.
be 1 or 2 tears along the way, but I got to tell you, this is no tears at all. No tears at all for this book.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, it's a romp. This is
Yeah.
total popcorn. This is cotton candy for the mind, I think. I liked it.
I liked it.
Okay, good.
It was fine.
Was it the first time you all had read it?
Oh no.
It's the
Not for
first time
me.
I had read it.
Okay.
So I've read 7 of the 11.
Oh, okay.
So, and I think part of the reason that I started reading them was because I got them for $1 on Kindle.
Me too.
Yeah.
And so, and that was when I had like 3 books on my Kindle. I had, I think, the complete writings of Martin Luther King and John Carter, Warlord of Mars. And I think somebody had given me Pride and Prejudice. No offense to Pride and Prejudice, but I was sitting there saying, what do I want to read at my lunchtime? Not the heavy philosophical stuff and not Pride and Prejudice. I think I'll read John Carter, and I read like seven of the books.
I love how
There
varied
you go.
that selection is.
I know that's a diverse selection.
All right.
I've got more on my Kindle now, but back then it was like, well, okay, let's read this one.
Got to start your library somewhere.
Kindle's new back in
It was
the
a
Stone
while.
Ages.
It
When
was a
this?
while. It was 2012
Yeah.
when I first got it, and so yeah. In fact, I think I read it on a Kindle. It was anyway. We'll get to that later. So we kind of liked the book.
Yeah.
Sure.
Ken liked it. Ken liked it more than Megan.
I went looking for things to like about it later because like I said, I went to go put it in context and I'm like, it's not really a terrible book. I'm just looking through it through this lens of
Yeah.
something that is not what he was intending, which is unfair.
Yeah. Well, and it's very obvious that it is a product of its time.
Yeah.
Yes.
In fact, I went back and I wanted to see just exactly when the Victorian era ended.
Okay.
And the Victoria era ended about 11 years before this book was published.
Okay.
So Edgar Rice Burroughs, as he's writing this book, is solidly still within the Victorian era of thinking about things. Technically, it was called the Edwardian era at that point in time. However,
Right.
I'm not sure that the Edwardian era and the Victorian era were all that different. And so the ideas about chivalry and about how men and women should be conducting themselves, all of these different kinds of things. I actually had a moment where when I'm reading it and I'm listening to John Carter's dialogue or diatribe in his head, and I'm finding myself remembering Mark Twain's how to introduce yourself to a woman that you do not know, but you need to save her from a burning building. Greetings, woman that I do not know. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, this is
it.
This is kind of how this goes. So
Well, it's interesting though, thinking about that time period because, you're talking about the Edwardian era where it was originally published in phases, like in a newspaper, kind of as a serial thing. And then it wasn't published in novel form until I want to say 1919-ish,
Yeah.
which would have been right after the war,
yeah,
the Great War. And so, like, I think a lot of people would have been in sort of a heroics mindset where they want to celebrate their heroes and the men who didn't come home and these people who worked so hard. And there was a
escapist
lot
literature.
of romance in that area. Yeah, escapist literature.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
like that.
I think that's a lot of it. And going into it, I went into this as in with the same perspective that I kind of look at hieroglyphics versus modern art. You know, and this is where all of what I appreciate now started.
Yeah.
So I looked at it with that kind of eye. I didn't go into it expecting Sandersonian depth, or, you know, the depth that Brent Weeks or some of the modern authors bring to their epic fantasy novels. I went into it going, how did this all start? And it really gives us a kind of simplified version of what science fiction and fantasy were, in the sense that it doesn't... Edgar Rice Burroughs was not, to my interpretation, was not interested in throwing deep philosophical discussion and something to think about into his stories. Yeah. He was interested in taking these scientific discoveries that were just being made. I mean, it's the turn of the century. In the late 19th century, they found these gorges on Mars, for example. They started to find these crevices and everything, and started to hypothesize maybe there was water there, or maybe there is life, or possibly there could be life, that sort of thing, which is something that now somebody like Burroughs takes and goes, ooh, we could turn this into a world. And he does. He mines Mars into this great setting for fantasy, but it's just for fun, fantastical stories that are kind of escapist, like we're talking about, and just kind of a product of letting imagination run wild. And he really lays the groundwork. This is the foundation for what we've come to expect from science fiction and fantasy today.
I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a science fiction, though. Like, it's definitely, I could call it a space fantasy, but there isn't really a lot of science going on in this. He falls asleep in a cave with creepy mist, and he wakes up on Mars, and he's like, I knew I was on Mars. Like, there was no doubt about it. And I'm like, really? There were no doubts? Like, there's nowhere else you could have been?
It's like
he magically appears on Mars.
Yeah, he doesn't, no explanation, and no explanation really necessary. You kind of just, as the reader, go, oh, okay, well, I guess this is happening, you know.
You accept it.
Yeah, but there isn't a lot of sciencey things.
No, but at the same time, I think the definition or the interpretation of science fiction has changed a little bit. Yeah. Right now, I mean, we have talked about it often, that the purpose of science fiction is for the science to drive the fiction.
Yep.
Yes, that is what I'm saying. If we're going based on that.
That is what we're at. But 100 years ago, I think science fiction, I mean, this is barely a decade after flight has been established or has been achieved, you know.
It's true.
The knowledge, the idea of science fiction is, let's build a story in outer space.
Well, there's a couple of things about this.
You know?
There's a couple of things about it that kind of lend itself to the place where we say, well, they're exploring scientific advances of what they could be if a more advanced civilization took a hold of them. The idea of the metals being extremely lightweight and yet being able to be propelled by these forces, the ninth ray, the idea that somehow light and sound can manipulate things. While these sound a lot of times like magic, they also are some of the same kinds of things that people are starting to deal with and use as maybe not tropes, but certainly as tools of the science fiction craft. The idea that we have a different race of people, and how they're bipedal for locomotion. They stand on 2 feet, and yet they lay eggs for their children. This is certainly something that, you know, as we explore different species and those kinds of things, that's a part of it.
Sure.
But when we come to things like, okay, let's talk about space travel, let's talk about advanced communication, let's talk about ray guns and all those kinds of things. Yeah, very, very light on, and you know, there's no armor. Everybody runs around naked. Oh wait, we're going to come back to that in just a second.
Megan's favorite part.
But they, you know, one of the things that Edgar Rice Burroughs' time would have been dealing with is advances in firearms. And here he's talking about the Martian weapons that can shoot 100 miles.
Yeah,
before the projectile will dive down. I mean, okay, that was not even a thought at their time, and yet now we've got weapons that will fire significant distances. I think that there are some things that, for his time, he could have defended it as, I'm studying the advances of science.
Well,
but for us looking backwards, it's kind of like, well, okay, if you want to have a Western in space, that's great, but why don't you put some clothes on, partner?
Yeah, there's like no science in there. Well, and they also have he has a discussion about how a lot of the communication with the Tharks takes place telepathically, where he can hear their thoughts, but they can't hear his thoughts.
We're going to come to that one too.
Okay. When are we? Because you keep saying we're going to come back to
Well,
things.
let's come
So
to
are
that
we
one. Let's go to that one now.
Okay.
Let's go to that one
We
right
can go
now.
to that one now.
We kind of beat the science fiction to a dead horse.
Well, we beat it like a dead thoat.
Sure. Like a dead thoat.
I'm trying not to use too many John Carter quotes, but I'll use a few.
You know, there really quick. There's another one right there. Is the fantastical terms, the names he comes up with for things are kind of rudimentary from what we've expected from science fiction and fantasy, I think, and that's fine because I mean we've established long ago that even Brandon Sanderson in his first books, you know, naming things was not his strong suit. That's something that has come.
He gets to make up whatever he wants. He didn't really. I mean, he had like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells and a couple of other people who went before him who made up these sort of things.
And that's
but otherwise,
basically all he had. He was laying the groundwork for what came after him.
In the difference between and maybe we'll get a chance to talk to this, but the difference really between H.G. Wells and Jules Verne and and Edgar Rice Burroughs is that Edgar Rice Burroughs was more concerned about the adventure, and I think that's where if we say that and Megan, maybe to your point, maybe this is more the first space opera more than an extension of science fiction. So that could be a really easy point to defend. What do you think about everybody being naked on Mars all the time?
I honestly didn't think about it all that much.
And that
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Until
I was going to say until I went looking for some cover art to post on Discord when I was like, "Hey, you guys have questions?" And I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, I can't post any of these. I'm a prude." So what you get is a lot of text.
Yeah, I can see that. I went looking for John Carter artwork and had to be very careful about making sure that I explained to my wife, no, this is not.
It's for research.
It's research, honey. It's for the podcast. I use that excuse all the time.
The best part is I was reading John Carter comic books when I was 12 and 13. So for me, and we may not come back to that.
You were prepared.
Yeah.
I mean, the one time I really thought about it was when he meets up with the man who is in charge of the machine that keeps the atmosphere going, and all he is wearing is this huge medallion. And in my mind, I was just like, well, I mean, I guess if you don't need clothes to keep you warm or like protect you from the elements, because they talk about how there's no weather, then I guess that's not such a big deal.
And no sunburn because they're all already red.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's a conversation stopper if I ever heard one.
You can tell I've been thinking about these books for a long time, can't you?
Maybe it's that the sun is farther away, so the solar radiation can't burn you quite as easily.
We're not going to talk about the thinness of the atmosphere at all. One of the things that I wanted to bring up with this is that this also is illustrative of its time. We've read a lot of books where some of the modern authors have put tremendous emphasis on different parts of anatomy. And we talk about some of the overt sexuality that shows up in some of the other books, and about how women are oftentimes objectified in some of the other books that we've read by some of the other authors. Mm-hmm. John Carter makes everybody naked.
Well, and it's kind of nice that he doesn't go into descriptions of what every single person is wearing in every single moment.
But that's the thing, is that he then just leaves it alone.
Yeah.
We never hear again about people being naked. He could easily, if he'd been some of the authors that we've read, the beginning of every chapter would have been some kind of a discussion about that. But no, he just leaves it alone.
He calls back to it once in a while, but it's not. He doesn't dwell on it at all. Other than they wear their necklaces and their metal that is instrumental in John Carter becoming, the superhero of Mars, because he keeps beating all of these Tharks.
He is the original One Punch Man, isn't he?
He is the original Superman.
Okay, and that was the one question that we got actually was about John Carter. What are your opinions on the influence of John Carter on superheroes like Superman?
Yeah.
I'm
wasn't
sorry.
That Kip Tan, I think?
That was from The Solution, asked us this question.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Somebody said it.
I think that again, part of its time, part of its growth.
Right.
It's very easy to see John Carter as the predecessor for Superman in the 1930s. When
I think absolutely, I think he directly was.
He can jump really high and he's super strong.
Yeah,
and no matter what he does, he seems to come out on top. It doesn't matter who he's fighting; he's always coming out on top.
Well, and he's all about kind of by accident, actually, I think in this case, but he ends up really unifying the planet.
Yeah.
And, he makes a point of, I want to learn your language. I want to be able to understand what's going on so I can protect myself. And also Deja Taurus. And, but he ends up in the end, like unifying these two divergent factions so that they can overthrow the real bad guys.
Yeah.
Because they're bad because they have Deja Taurus. Again, anyway. But how do I really feel?
You didn't like Deja Taurus? Come on.
I didn't mind her. I didn't like John Carter of Mars. Oh. Anyway, so I want to think, like, Superman is obviously a lot more philanthropic than John Carter because he definitely had selfish reasons for a lot of the things that he did. But with the powers and with the way that he was able to unify people, I could see that as a basis for Superman.
Superman comes from a different planet. John Carter comes from a different planet.
Yep.
Superman wears clothes. John Carter does not. Superman does not kill people. John Carter kills just about everything in his way.
Yeah.
Every chance he
With
gets.
impunity.
There are some different, although there are some tropes that John Carter creates that science fiction and superheroes use later on. I'm thinking specifically of Adam Strange in the DC universe that has a zeta beam that transports him back and forth between Rand.
I don't remember.
So anyway, he transports him back and forth. He can spend like 10 days with his wife, and then he gets transported back to Earth. And it happens over and over and over and over and over again. And so remember when I was younger and I was reading John Carter, Warlord of Mars, I found that and I thought, oh, that sounds just like Adam Strange. So obviously these pieces that have been put in place by Edgar Rice Burroughs are things that follow. Flash Gordon using swords as well as ray guns. We've got the same thing, and we got the same thing with John Carter.
The dichotomy of the technology, how it's both hyper advanced and also primitive. Yeah, it's there.
And he jumps like a Jedi.
Can I just say though, I thought it was really interesting that.
But that's Dune. That's Dune.
That's true. We get a glimpse of, 9 years later, this is how things are going. And he still has those powers where he's able to jump really tall and be super strong and is able to last in the atmosphere a lot longer than everybody else can. Because he's from Earth. But I just thought, wouldn't he after a while get used to the strange gravity on that planet? And then he wouldn't have those advantages necessarily. And so that's another way that he is like Superman, and that Superman never adjusts. He just is.
But at the same time, it's alluded to that he might be immortal anyway. So
perhaps
at the beginning of the book, he can't remember. He has no. He can't remember his earliest memory.
Is he immortal? Because literally the whole thing it's a letter that he wrote to his nephew after he died. Like his nephew's reading it because he has died. Or has he just withdrawn from civilization?
Yeah. One of the, and this was one of those places where, and I don't know if the two of you ever saw the movie.
Nope.
Yeah.
The movie was panned by critics and it was scorned by a lot of fans. I think largely because they had Deja Taurus wearing clothes. But
it was a Disney movie. She had to.
Of course she had to. And the best part about that though for me was that
I know Craig's going to roll his eyes, but she was still smoking hot.
They did a wonderful I'm ignoring that. They did a wonderful job of trying to set up this idea that he found a way to take himself back to Mars. And he did that by locking himself in a mausoleum and arranging a death of sorts so that he's no longer in the population on Earth, but he's up in Mars.
Well, that just makes sense because at the end of this book, he is back on Earth. Yeah. Like he is no longer on Mars, and there are 10 other books. So he has to get back there somehow.
And he does. And it is so much fun to see him get back to Mars.
I can't wait until we get to discuss all 11 of them, Megan.
So
have fun, you guys.
So first-person narration.
That two-man
the first-person narration for this book, was that distracting in this book?
No, because it was John Carter's chronicle. I mean, it was basically, here, I'm John Carter, I'm telling a story. It was kind of expected. I didn't think it was that.
Well, I'm sorry. Well, I stopped paying attention for a minute. What are we talking about?
Was the narration in this book, was the first-person narration in this book a little off-putting?
Yes.
I figured you'd say that.
Yeah. I thought it was because he really does refer to himself as, I am the most amazing person. And this would have been hard for some people, but I had no problem with it. I also, all right, one of the reasons I hate John Carter was because, he has this comment. Where does it go? Where he doesn't bother to ask why things are the way they are. He goes, why they did not arrange to build their vaults and incubators closer to home has always been a mystery to me. And like many other Martian mysteries, it's unsolved and unsolvable by earthly reasoning and customs. So he didn't bother to ask questions, so it's unsolved and unsolvable? Like,
Yes.
I'm sure somebody knew the answer. It's like there's usually a reason for things and somebody knows, but I don't care and I don't want to know. So
I think it is.
It probably could be an imperialist thing. Craig is throwing questions at us. He's really a good peanut gallery today. He said, "Is that an imperialist thing? Maybe."
It very well
Maybe.
could be. It wouldn't put it, or it would not surprise me. That's where I'm going. Sorry. It wouldn't surprise me if John Carter had that attitude of, well, I can't figure it out, therefore doesn't matter.
I think it's weird, but there's nobody to talk to about it, so I guess we'll never know.
Yeah.
Again, part of its time, probably not necessarily something that would have been dramatically offensive to the readership at the time. But as
Right.
we look at it now, through a lens of 100 years and more, it's kind of one of those where we go, really?
I would have liked
Yeah.
to
Did
know a
you
little
just
bit more
say
about
that?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like that with a lot of things he said. Here's another one. So, another one of my favorite ones. I verily believe that, so this is after he has offended Deja Thoris. He doesn't know why, but she won't talk to him. And he's like, I'm not going to talk to her. I'm going to give her a space because I'm a good guy and that's the right thing to do. But he's like, I verily believe that a man's way with women is an inverse ratio to his prowess among men. The weakling and the saphead have great ability to charm the fair sex, while the fighting man who can face 1,000 real dangers unafraid sits hiding in the shadows like some frightened child. I'm like, okay, so what you're saying is you'll face 1,000 dangers and death and all of this destruction, but you can't talk to a girl? And
You know
that's
what?
somehow a girl's fault that she likes the guy that'll talk to her?
For some reason, I saw that played out in high school over and over and over.
Because they were willing to talk to the girl.
Because I was willing to talk to the girl, and the football players were still getting the cute
Also,
ones.
it worked in
They
your
were
favor.
meatheads.
Oh, that's nice. I did not
Sometimes-
see it going that way.
Sometimes it worked in my favor, not always.
Well, that is true to life.
You're a good friend.
I was the saphead and the weakling in high school.
That was a good friend.
Until I challenged one of the football players to a duel with swords, and then I had a lot of fun. But that's a different story. I learned a lot from John Carter. Were
You
there
just
any
get
other
cooler
questions?
every moment.
Were there any other questions that came through, or do we get to just keep talking?
No, that was pretty much it. Well, Kipton had asked.
We can always count on Kipton.
Kipton.
Yeah.
Well, we've already kind of talked about it, though.
While she's looking that up, it read mostly, the story reads like a tall tale, like somebody sitting around a campfire saying, let me tell you about the time where I went to Mars. And, then,
Yeah.
and it reads like that. So
does.
it didn't bother me that it was first person, and it didn't bother me that he embellished some of his accomplishments, as it were,
Sure.
Because we still do that. When we did the, when we talked about I don't remember, the Patrick Rothfuss books, whatever his name was, I can't remember.
Both.
Thank you. That was a common thing. Is he embellishing, or did he really do all these fantastic things?
Doesn't matter.
It's a first person narrative. You got to expect some
It's a
embellishment.
memoir. It's not a history.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Yeah, no. Kipton said, how did it feel reading the style of such an old book? And could you tell it was old just from that? And also, please talk about the clothing.
Yeah.
I think we,
Well, we've
You're
all
welcome,
had,
Kip.
We've
I
all
think
had
we established that one.
The interesting thing is when I was reading John Carter comic books, they couldn't be quite so literal about the fact that everybody was naked.
Okay.
But I will say this: every now and again, as I was reading some of the things that he was saying he was doing, I was thinking to myself, "And you were naked doing that?" I'm not sure.
That's true.
So, but I wonder if it was a mechanism to give Edgar Rice Burroughs a chance to say, I don't want to talk about clothes. I don't want to talk about uniforms. I don't want to talk about any of that stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about restricted
way,
corsets. Like,
easiest way is to say they wore a harness that held their swords and their gear, and that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's why. But it certainly wasn't used, and it probably, I can see this. I'm not sure. I didn't look it up and say, how was John Carter received back in 1912? But I could see it being something scandalous to have said, and everyone was naked, that mothers would have gone, and they would have protected their fair children.
but at the same time, the people at that point, like that was, Edgar Rice Burroughs was British, right? Like they were all, I'm reasonably sure. But they had, the sun never sets on the British Empire, where it was just literally covered the whole world. And so they'd have like the, African natives who, they were naked and isn't that so scandalous? And they're so cute and they're so innocent kind of thing. So I could see the same thing with Mars, except in this situation, they were not innocent because they were all murdery.
Very warlike.
They were very murdery and warlike.
Edgar Rice Burroughs was American, born in Chicago, Illinois.
Well, I can be wrong, and I was.
Yeah.
But I think he uses all three names to give himself credibility that he wants to borrow because he is a Chicagoan.
Probably.
He and Harry Dresden.
Edgar Burroughs is just hard to say. Edgar Burroughs. I don't like it.
It would probably be Ed Burroughs
Now,
in Chicago.
there is
Eddie Burroughs.
There is one question that I have been dying to ask. Kenn,
Yes.
was there enough punchin' in this book for you?
Oh yeah. It was. That's all it was. I mean, and that's all it was pretty much going to be, because it's stories back then. And I don't know if that's quite the way. But what I expect from early pulp novels is action like that. It's everything. There isn't any philosophical, political discussion to really be about. So everything is kind of action oriented. It's even if it's not, shoot 'em up action or a lot of punching, as it were. Everything is, this is where we are. We get to there. We have action. We got to do business to get from here to there. So everything is kind of action oriented back then. And there isn't a lot of deep discussion. There isn't a lot of, and there's not a lot of detail. Like, for example, maybe that's the reason he got rid of the clothes. So he didn't have to go into detail about those things. Yeah. He could just go, here's the plot. We're driving the plot. The end.
Interesting that you say that. I did find, I don't know if it's level 3. It's probably more of a level 2. The attitudes about love in the cultures, because man, it drives John Carter just the whole, he loves Asia. But he makes observations throughout the different cultures and the way that they approach it. Yeah. Where they have the Tharks who really are just very warlike and have no love at all except for Sola and Tarsh Tarkus. And these people end up succeeding because of that. And, Sola is she's looked down upon. And then you have like the shrew Sarjoka?
Sarkoja.
Okay. I can't say it. And
Todd knows.
Yeah, but you have like the shrew who's like, oh, those people are in love, so we need to squash that because that's not a part of society. And then you have John Carter, where his main motivation is for the love of this woman, to the point where she gets engaged to some other guy and she's like, I'm sorry, that's it. I have pledged myself, which basically means we're married, which basically means I'm so sorry because we're all about tradition here. And so that's what that is. And so John Carter's first response is, well, then I have to kill that guy. And she's like, you can't.
Because if you
kill him, we can't get married.
The murderer, I can't marry the murderer of my husband. He's like, okay, well then we'll find some. But I'm like, literally, that's your response. That is such a morally bankrupt thing where it should be this lovely, pure thing. And I can see, I can see some teenage girl in 1917 reading this kind of on the sly because they're all naked. So it's whoa, what? Chaperone's not okay with that.
And because girls
but
don't
I can
read
see her reading it and be like,
fiction.
oh my gosh, that's so romantic. He loves her so much. He just doesn't want anything to come between them. Which
and
again,
you were
I'm
ready
just like,
to just be disgusted by it.
So morally bankrupt. It's not okay to murder someone. And also,
you're murdering them for love.
Murdering them for love. I mean, it kind of turns out okay because, again, he doesn't directly murder this guy. But he finds a way, because it's like she's decided she's going to marry this man whose name I can't remember. Sabthan.
Something. There we go, yeah. Sabthan.
Where she was going to marry him so that her people would be protected. Like, it's a very valid reason. It's a good, political alliance often works. And John's like, no, we're going to kill him. But to do that, I guess I should go to your people and make an alliance with these guys. And then we should go and then we destroy, so he finds a way to still get the girl and still save this whole civilization. But I still just feel like it's really morally bankrupt to be like, okay, basically I want to save you. And the only way we can do that is to kill a lot of people So it's not like he was trying to save a society. He was just like, no, I want this chick.
Yeah, but
she's my chick. She's the hottest thing ever.
But it's Mars.
But it's Mars.
But it's Mars. And he's a fighting man from Virginia.
And went on Mars.
So
that's
he was the Martians
thing. Went on
too.
Mars.
I
finally had to come to that situation where I'm just like, ugh, he's on Mars and that's how they are, but it's stupid.
I had my huge question for Kenn. Was there enough punching in
Yes.
this? I have my huge question for you, Megan.
Oh, no.
How did you feel about the wedding ceremony and the chains and the padlocks?
I was just so happy that it wasn't just the woman being chained up. Like, they're literally being chained together. And I was like, okay, so the guy's in chains. Like, that's just not flattering on any level. And again, they're all still naked. Like, it's just all very strange. It could have been a lot worse than it was.
I have to tell you, when I read that, or when they got to that part again, because I'd been through it before, so I remembered certain pieces and other pieces you kind of gloss over. I'm listening to it in the car, and we get to that spot, and my daughter is riding in the car with me.
Oh, no.
And I looked at her and I said, Megan is going to be so offended by this part.
So, I mean, the symbolism was kind of fantastic in that scene.
Yeah.
And like the mental image of him coming in and like destroying the chains. Literally, like there's no subtlety there.
No.
Yeah.
No.
But there didn't need to be.
Again, I'm okay. I said there were no tears in this book. There were no tears, but there was a moment where I went, wait a minute, I don't remember this part. And it was, I kept trying to remember how it was that Deja Thoris had committed herself. And then we get to the part where she says, oh no, this is all for my people. This is all for my people.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, a modern take on this would have come across very different in that scene as well. Mm-hmm. This book very much is a book of its time. Would you say as long as you can keep that in mind, it's not so bad?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Well, and clearly it has aged well because it's still in circulation.
Yeah.
And people still keep reading. And there's always a new generation of Edgar Rice Burroughs fans, of John Carter fans who have just discovered it in the last little bit.
To the point that they made a movie less than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
They did. And
that was not as bad as I expected.
No, it wasn't as bad as I was. For those that don't know, I mean, I would say, go check out the movie if you enjoyed the book, but don't expect the book to be anything. Don't expect the two to be an awful lot similar.
I was actually surprised at how much they paralleled each other. It did not a lot. I mean, it wasn't, but I've had 10 years almost of expectations, trod upon before I saw it. It's awful. Oh, it's nothing like the book. Oh, it's blah, blah, blah. And then I went and saw it. I'm like, well, that's like the book. Well, this is in the book. Well, that's in the book. I mean, it's different a little bit, but it's in there. And
adaptations are
honestly,
never going to be
bad.
exactly what we want them to be.
Yeah, and when there's so much buildup and so much hype that surrounds any kind of a project, you always find that there's going to be people who are going to walk away from it saying, terribly disappointed because it wasn't even close to what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Congratulations. All unhappiness comes from unmet expectations. Hope that works for you the rest of your life.
Yep. That was the vehicle that was supposed to drive Taylor Kitsch into action hero stardom. And what has he done since?
And it's too bad because I actually think he did a
Taylor Kitsch is not a bad actor.
He did a pretty decent job. I like I said, I enjoyed the film, but then I liked Buckaroo Banzai and his adventures across the eighth dimension.
Who didn't?
So there you go. Were there any scenes, we're kind of coming to the end of what our time is. Were there any scenes that you remember that you say to yourself, that one I really enjoyed? Okay, Megan is saying nothing there.
I need to think. You can't just throw things at me and expect me just to know.
I can't think of anything that stuck out in particular, other than I thought it was hilarious every time they would say sack for jump. The word, the Martian, the Barsoomian word for jump is sack, and I would just laugh every time because I'm 12. I know. Inside every man is a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah, that never really grew up.
Yeah. But so that was funny. But there were two lines that made me laugh because even though this was kind of popcorn literature, he still got a couple of jabs in there. One, The line, in one respect at least, the Martians are a happy people. They have no lawyers.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
And then later, they did no work themselves, being government officials. He's still got a couple of jabs in there, which were great. But
very obvious that it was a little different time, but a lot of the same problems.
Yep, some problems never go away.
Megan, how about you?
I think for me, one of my favorite scenes was that when Sola tells John Carter about her parents and kind of gives him some background information, where she says, I had my mother. My mother was very different from everybody else, where she learned to love, and she told this warrior about it and was very prepared for the warrior to strike her down. And it turned out the warrior felt the same way. Mm-hmm. And I just sat there and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like people just don't realize what a miracle love is when you have two people that care about each other at the same time. And for this woman to have been so very vulnerable and knowing that she might die because she's being vulnerable, and then to have that be rewarded, I really appreciated that. I just really enjoyed the whole story with the parents. And I had kind of this moment where I'm like, but arranged marriages are fine. They work all the time. People do that all the time. Except their society was not like that. It wasn't, it was one man and a whole bunch of women who worked under him that he didn't really appreciate. And so to have this one woman who, she ended up dying for her sacrifice, but she, Tarkus never betrayed her. She ended up dying, but she didn't betray him. So nobody knew that he was the father except for Sola. And, later, he gets to claim her as his daughter. I thought that was really cool, especially since I really felt like Sola was such a doormat for so much of it. Yeah. But you kind of understand why and how she's like, no, I was a product of love. And I still kind of I realize that this is my society. And that's probably not going to happen for me. And then she meets Deja Thoris, who, when John Carter says, okay, Deja, we're going to escape. We're going to get out of here because this is looking bad for us. And Deja's like, Sola, you have to come with us.
Yeah.
Please come with us because you are not going to be loved and cherished here. And you can come with us and live in a place of joy and happiness and light, somewhere where you're appreciated. And I was like, thank you. Yes. That's what she deserves. That is what she needs. Thank you. That was my favorite thing about Deja. I was like, thank you for giving Deja Thoris just a little bit of a personality. Thank you for giving us a little bit of a window into the person she is. To contrast that with the scene where they're in mortal danger and they're trying to flee the bad guys. And John Carter's like, here, get on the throat and get out of here. And she's like, but I love you. And he's like, well, I love you. And she's like, then I'm going to stay with you. And they kiss. And he's like, no, I'm going to put you back on this because you picked the absolute worst moment to declare yourself. Get out of here. Go be safe.
I want to see a one-woman dramatic reading of Princess of Mars by Megan.
I'll tell you what I'd like
I would pay money. I would pay Patreon money.
Did you
for
enjoy that whole little dramatic reading?
I will say this: there has been in the world of the comic books, Ultimate Comics or Dynamite Comics, one of them has produced an entire Deja Thoris Warlord of Mars series.
Ooh, she becomes a warlord?
She becomes the warlord. And actually, John Carter is eventually referred to as the Warlord of Mars.
Okay.
And that's where that comes from. But this whole Deja Thoris series, very different, very modern, very 21st century kind of a woman. Okay. I would imagine if ever you were looking for a graphic novel to read and have some fun to see if this group of people could be redeemed by giving them a more modern slant, you might get a kick out of that.
All right.
And I do want to mention, you mentioned, I said at the beginning, there might have been close to one tear. It was during the time that Sola was telling her story to John Carter.
Oh.
Because this idea, and part of it was, and this is also the level 3 moment that I saw. I mean, friendship, okay. Yeah, great. Friendship is, and that's a piece that's woven through most of the books that we read. But in this particular book, it was the question of trust. Whom do you trust? Here are all of these people around Sola that are her people.
Yeah.
And she trusts none of them because she knows that she's different. Here is John Carter, this strange being from another planet who doesn't look like he fits in at all, who is kind of the butt of every joke that goes around, but he can still knock people over and kill people with a single punch. I mean, all of these things that make him absolutely not like her. And yet she instinctively knows that she can trust him.
Yeah.
And that trust between the two of them is what finally winds up being able to unite the Tharks. It's what finally allows John Carter to be able to set the stage, to be able to win back his lady love. All of those kinds of pieces happen because one person trusts one other person with a secret, and they are both loyal to it.
Yeah.
They both have fidelity to it, and they share it. And she tells John Carter, you can do whatever you want to with this. I trust you with it, and that you will treat this with respect.
Yeah. She even tells him who her father is. Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
literally nobody else knows.
And all of a sudden, John Carter says, rather than saying, like in some of the books that we might read now, where he says, and now I have a piece of information, and I can use this information, and I plan to use this information to make sure that all the things that I want to have happen in the way. No, he holds on to it, and then he says to Tars, you need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there was a place where I was close to shedding a single tear in this book, it was there.
All right.
And it was beautiful.
All right.
Are there any things in this book that you really, really, really think didn't age well, or would make you say this is not a book for this kind of person because they're just not going to enjoy it?
Yes.
Please.
I'm interested to hear what Megan has to say.
Going
about
back
this.
to my list of reasons I hate John Carter.
That's a long list.
It's a really. Well, I mean, I have
Small font,
example
double-sided.
snippets of the writing.
Oh, so these aren't individual items.
No. This is an item, and now it's backed up by a paragraph of text.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought this was a page of like 75 different things that you hate about John Carter.
No, there are only like 11
Only
reasons
11.
why I hate him.
Only 11.
One for each book.
Well, there we go.
It's the whole fact that John is like, he's happy enough to have women taking care of him, but he doesn't really want anything to do with them in the Tark society, where he realizes, he rises to a certain level of prominence.
Very
and so
quickly.
he needs to have a household, and they're like, okay, so you're going to have people take care of you. It's like, no, I don't need that. But these women are like, no, but we're going to take care of you. He's like, no, but we are going to. And literally it says in the text at one point, thereafter, I saw little of them, nor did I care to. It's just like, okay, so you're just going to let them. Meanwhile, he treats the animals really, really well. Like, he is super good to until he needs Willa to like get out of here because it's not convenient. He treats the animals so well, but he treats the women kind of terribly. I feel like that is not a reason why I could really recommend this book to a certain subset of people who that would really bother.
Okay.
I'm sure we know them.
Okay.
You do know them.
Do you have any people that you feel wouldn't appreciate this book?
Anybody who can't register the era from which this comes,
Yeah.
Okay.
which I'm not gonna comment on society. So,
Okay.
anybody who can't recognize that this book was written 100 years ago,
A
Yeah,
product
would
of
you
its
say
time.
take it?
It
Would you
is
say take it with a grain of salt? Like,
a
enjoy that it was written
huge
100 years ago.
box of salt, because it was written 100 years ago and it reads like it was written 100 years ago. Just
It's
take
a
it with
thrilling
that filter.
tale about a dashing hero.
Yeah.
In
Like,
some
that's-
ways,
Accept it
What it is.
with that lens, and you'll be fine.
it's not so different from Shakespeare in the way that the men and women are treated. In most of Shakespeare's writing, the women are treated very two-dimensionally. The men are treated a little bit more, a little bit more grace and a little bit more opportunity to have personalities and motives and means. In some ways, perhaps not so different from Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens focuses on his primary character, fleshes that primary character out quite well.
Yeah.
And some of the supporting characters, male or female. I mean, we haven't talked at all about Cantos Can, but
True.
he
I like
shows
him.
up. He's kind of the Robin to John Carter's Batman. He shows up and he's like, "Oh, you're in trouble again? I have to save you from yourself again?" Yes, John Carter, and I'm so glad you can, because I will do whatever you need. Oh, but I'm
Yeah.
probably going to screw it up again.
I'm in prison. Thanks for coming to rescue me. Sorry I didn't do what you needed me to.
This time I will for sure. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I
Shoot.
blew it again.
Every Don Quixote needs a Sancho Panza.
I did not not think about that.
It's
That makes
also
me so
true.
happy.
Yeah.
Also true. So,
yet another trope that has cultivated over the years.
and continues to be reinforced on several levels.
Yep.
We talked originally about similarities between superheroes and John Carter.
Okay.
I'm wondering if there are any of the what we would now call science fiction tropes that you found in this book that you said, "Oh yeah, I'm recognizing now that this is the beginning point." I talked a little bit about the zeta beams and the transference. The idea of moving from one phase of existence or one plane of existence to another is one that has been used by several other authors. Piers Anthony has used it. The guy who wrote White Gold Wielder, I can't remember who it was. I apologize. I'm sure somebody's screaming it out right now in their car while they're riding.
Thank you, that person. I don't know.
Send it back on Discord and we'll take care of it.
Brandon uses it. I mean, he's got the three realms.
Yeah. So that's a trope that starts kind of with John Carter. And I'm not sure that Edgar Rice Burroughs is getting a nickel for Edgar Rice Burroughs is dead.
The estate of Edgar Rice
But I'm not
Burroughs.
sure. Yeah, I'm not sure he's getting a nickel every time that trope is used. But
I think he's doing all right, though.
it certainly is one that is telegraphed.
Yeah.
That has been used over and over again since then. Yeah. Any others that you guys noticed that you would say, we've kind of danced around a few of them.
Well, he's often used, like we said earlier, it's hinted but not necessarily confirmed that John Carter might be immortal, like the Highlander, the Highlander type people. Well, the Highlander, I love that movie.
I did too.
The series of movies is
It was
great.
It was a great punch in film.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that shaped me as a kid.
Do I believe
there
that,
can be
Ken.
only one. I love that movie. I mean, as Ricky Bobby said, greatest movie ever made. So
The fact that you use Highlander and Ricky Bobby, I'm all aboard.
But the idea of the immortal protagonist, so that you can create a series of books that don't age, where you can just keep creating books and you don't have to worry about aging out your protagonist. I mean, even Piers Anthony, we go back to the Xanth series and Piers Anthony, his characters age as the books progress, which I love, by the way, that because you get a whole series of new protagonists as you go along to fill in, just like life. It's like, hey, I'm reading the progression of life. It's great. Or didn't Sherlock Holmes age as he went?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
And on the other hand, you get James Bond, who they just keep replacing actors, but it's the same James Bond every time, which I always liked the theory that the James Bond was the persona, not the... Anyway, we can go into
it's
that.
the name.
I like that.
It's not the person.
It's the name, not the person. But anyway, so that's one. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
Megan, how about you?
I can't think of any off the top of my head
Okay.
specifically from Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Well, and I don't know if anybody else used flight before him. I mean, being that it was,
Yeah,
like I said, barely a decade since
I don't know.
the discovery of flight. So
I think that there's, I think if we dug deeper, we could probably find a few.
maybe.
But
Yeah, I haven't really read any H.G. Wells. Or
Well,
it's been a while since I've read Jules Verne.
Yeah, and they had flying
all I can
machines
think
even
of is-
before the advent of flight. So
yeah. The interesting thing is Edgar Rice Burroughs, as well known as he is sometimes for John Carter, is also very well known for another adventure series,
Tarzan. Yeah.
And the difference between the two, while there are some differences between the two, there are some obvious similarities. We have a man of a particular civilization that finds himself in a civilization that he doesn't understand, that he's not part of, and that he has to try to fit into. Both of those series very much are products of their time, but they are things that have given us jumping off points for things in our time that continue to give us inspiration. I really loved these books.
I'm glad.
I'm glad that you guys were willing to read them with me. I'm so glad that you didn't hate them completely.
There were many good things about this book.
But
that I recognized better looking back on them than while I was reading them.
But I do want to know. I want you to know. There were a lot of times that I said, "Oh boy, Megan's really going to beat me up for this one." So thank you for being a good sport and reading this book.
You're welcome for waiting until after we finish video recording so that you still look pretty. What?
You need to go watch the movie because I want to hear what you have to think about it.
Okay.
Yeah, that might be fun.
All right.
Hey, and in the meantime, I know that we're going to be exploring other things. I don't know that we're going to be exploring any more John Carter, but stay tuned and we'll see where we go from there.